Hello, Heather Jean here. I'm so happy to have you here. Confidence Through Cabaret, the podcast. All things confidence. And today we are talking about, well, pleasure really. And, in a nutshell, if I had to pick one word for our guest, we're talking about pleasure. And we are so aligned in this episode
Mm.
to be talking about, using our bodies, to being able to using our experience, to being able to take up space and share our message. And I'm so excited when I meet somebody who's doing really the same kind of things that I'm doing, because it just strengthens the movement. Welcome, Cayla.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm so happy to be putting this out here, because our first conversation was you saying, "Oh, I'm a fellow performer. Let's talk."
I
And
know.
now
Well,
here we are.
I think it's actually pretty rare to find someone who is doing cabaret and then weaving it into coaching. So I was like, this woman's on my page.
Yes. Yeah. And
Mhm.
so a little bit about Cayla then. So Cayla is a coach, and we will be talking about coaching, and a lot of the coaching movement have their own interpretation of what coaching is and what coaching does. And, some have 12-month programs, and some have, one-to-ones, and some have groups, and some have all kinds of different things. So we will come back to coaching in this episode, but we also want to talk about the central embodiment practice, that is so, I mean, it's the whole reason why we started Confidence Through Cabaret. It's the whole kind of core of so many of our podcast guests, and as well as being a coach and burlesque performer and actress, you just are so aligned in terms of just wanting people to feel sparks.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And seeing sparks as the joy and the passion for the life, like getting out of bed and just feeling inspired for what it is that you want to do and being and living unreasonably, like living for something that is like, this doesn't make much sense. People aren't really going to understand it, but I'm going to do it anyway because it feels good and it feels connected to my core.
Yeah. And that's, there's an awful lot of people talking about that, kind of aligned with your values, aligned with your passion, your inner knowing, all of those things. And I can remember when I first started with the online business, because I've had my own training and coaching business for over 25 years. But it was corporate, and it was a very different energy. And when I started online, people kept talking about all of this, like your inner knowing, your core, and I was like, I don't think I get it, because I didn't know what that was. How
Yeah.
did you find your inner knowing?
So I love that you're asking that because my life actually took a bit of a left turn where I feel like I was always very connected to it. I went to school for acting. It's all about unblocking the body and just aligning to truth. So that was my focus day in and day out. And and then, living in New York, you're trying to pay rent, it's expensive. So I wound up working in a hedge fund and having a complete where I'm the only woman in the office for 2.5 years. So I took this like total turn. I cut my hair short. I aligned completely with the masculine. I was always hustling. And I was like, what happened? And I had my own coach at my own time. I was living with all men. So I literally went through this phase for about 2 years where I was not around a woman. Like it was surreal. It was so weird. So within that, I started to figure out like and appreciate all of the who I was, like actually the strengths that I had as a woman, where the patriarchy was kind of, bringing me down a bit, and telling me to act in this certain way. And I was putting on a show and I had lost my authenticity. And when I lost it was when I was able to see when I had it and then had to start peeling back the layers. So it was sort of this kind of roundabout way of going and through my own path of awakening and finding it all over again.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us, I certainly was. uncomfortable with the idea of hearing people talk about things like peeling back the layers. I was
Mhm.
like, no, I have those layers for a reason because they protect me and they keep me in the space that I know. And I can tell you that if you don't do the work with the peeling back, the layers will peel back anyway. And I think a lot of people
Oh,
found that
yeah.
out during COVID, right? Because those layers, when we were locked down, there was an awful lot of peeling.
Oh my god, so much so. I actually met someone, my partner who I now live with, the month before the lockdown. Yeah. So we started to get to know one another, and I was like, I mean, all of the defenses because, and we mentioned before, I had been a matchmaker before. So I have this also background of, just so much kind of layers of when you're helping everyone find love, like I almost knew a little bit too much. So then I had so many protective layers for myself because, I was like, okay, well, I know that things could end at any point because I've been through so many clients who thought it was the one and then it wasn't. So I was protected. And, it was like through having this time where I was like, okay, well, I can't really meet anyone else. I can't really date anyone else. So let me actually give this person the time to get to know them. And I just was like, you always find the person who can give you the most amount of healing. So I was just like, okay, here's the mirror. Oh God, another mirror. Oh God, you know, just like, and now thank God we're here and I live with him and things could not be better. So, but it was I mean, in through COVID and it was rough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people ended up moving in together way earlier than they would have, or certainly spending time together in ways that they wouldn't have because they couldn't go out on actual dates and
Yeah.
things. It's interesting you say that about being a matchmaker because when we combine that with peeling back the layers and a lot of what we do, because you and I in our coaching practices, there has to be a certain amount of, well, peeling back the layers, doing the acceptance piece and healing
Mm.
and finding that inner knowing. But a lot of us, we kind of lose our way in it all, and then we kind of shut down and we don't have that acceptance. And we talk about this a lot in Confidence to Cabaret with the shrinking. I have
Yes.
never said to a woman, and a lot of men as well, but I've never said to a woman about the shrinking.
Mm.
Everybody goes, yeah, I know the
Mhm.
shrinking. So when we talk about matchmaking and we talk about, kind of peeling back the layers and stuff, did you do work on the accepting yourself before you expect others to fill the void?
So this is actually one of the reasons I left matchmaking, um, was and this is why I transitioned to be a coach, because it was so easy. Matchmaking at the end of the day is actually a time-saving service, and it's very easy to place blame. So it's but we know in this space, you have to do the work on yourself and you have to take, radical ownership over what it is. And I do believe, and I did believe that so many of my clients, I was like, if they just settled down for a second, did some internal work, cleared out some space in their calendar, they would have a relationship. But I'm over here spinning my wheels, going out and meeting people for them, like getting the guy in and then being like, actually, I have this person for you. I was like, this doesn't feel good for me anymore. And
Mm.
that's kind of why I transitioned away from it. I really do believe that every person, when they find their passion and when they find the thing that gives them sparks, which is where this all came from in the first place, they're going to be magnetic. They're going to attract that person. And they're going to come in the due time, when the person is ready.
Yeah. Yeah, and that person can take so many different forms. I mean, it doesn't have to be a romantic relationship, because that I mean, there's that I don't even want to go down the spectrum. I live in the world of the spectrums of, you know, um sexual identity, gender identification, sexual preferences, but also around that whole kind of piece about, you know, am I romantic in some way? Am I heteromantic? Am I homoromantic? You know, all of like there are
Mhm.
so many different levels to it, and people kind of simplify it by talking about LGBTQAI plus, and you know, and kind of going, yeah, that covers the whole spectrum, but it isn't, because you know that heteromanticism isn't for everybody, or romanticism isn't for everybody, you know. And
It's
and
true.
sometimes it's about attracting people that we work with, or attracting communities that we join, or you know, different ways. It doesn't have to be this American sitcom kind of setup, you know.
Yeah. Actually have one of my favorite clients that I worked with, I actually would always tell her, "Just focus on the feeling of love," and wound up falling in love with a woman. And she had never been with a woman prior. And it just she was like, "This is the feeling though. You told me to focus on the feeling and I was feeling it." So I just kept going with the feeling and, they're buying a house together. So it's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think even with COVID now, exactly what you're saying is so true with friendships. We've all changed. And the friends that we had before, some of them we might have outgrown. And
Mhm.
now we have, blossomed or bloomed into this new person. And who are you calling in for a friend? Who are you calling in as your new soul sister to connect with? That's going to change too.
Absolutely, absolutely. Do aerial dance as well as burlesque, and I lived at my studio before COVID because I did pole, hoop, lollipop, silks, anything in the air. I did it, and I would do like 4 hours in an evening if I was in the country. You know, before COVID, we could travel, but if I wasn't traveling, I was at my studio every night, and now I don't want that kind of balance. I don't
Mm,
I don't have that same energy, and I don't mean the energy for exercise. I mean, I had a lot of anger, and that was my way of expressing or finding mindfulness. Because if for me, mindfulness of sitting in the now is hard. I'm an extrovert, but
yeah.
me hanging from something, you have to be in the now or you will fall. You know, if you start thinking about that thing somebody said that really annoyed you, you
Yeah.
fall,
And
right?
you're
So
falling from a high place when you're doing silks.
exactly. So I enjoyed that, you know, kind of enforced mindfulness. In that was my practice. Well, of course, when all of that ended, apart from I have a pole in my home, but I don't have other apparatus. But apart from that, I really didn't have that same need by the time COVID started to wind down, or
Mm.
the lockdown started to change anyway. I don't know if
Yeah.
COVID's winding down ever, but you know, I now have different ways of expressing it, and
Mm.
I've learned about the feminine energy in a much more intimate way than I ever was connected to before, because I was in that male world like you know,
Yes. Oh, and I wanna know how are you expressing it now? How are you finding it when you say that?
well,
Mm.
so before I thought that feminine energy was about being feminine, you know. So I did hair and nails and makeup and heels, and I loved the whole kind of expression of the female. Um, and I think now my feminine energy, I should say, shows up about intuition, which I
Mm.
didn't have any sense of because I didn't peel back the layers. And if you don't peel back the layers, you can't hear your inner voice because it's a really small whisper and it's way down deep. And until
Yes.
you peel back those layers, you don't hear those. So it's showing up in intuition, it's showing up in creativity, and it's showing up in balance in ways that I can pay attention to. Sometimes I go through periods where I wake up and I cannot be in the masculine, being doing, or you know, driving, competing, results, all those kind of words, which I'm used to, and I do strongly feel comfortable in that environment because I know how to do that. I know how to play the patriarchy game in business.
Mhm.
But I wake up sometimes and I think I can't. Like I just can't. I need to just be, you know, and that can go on for a few days. And then I'll wake up again and I'll be like, okay, I'm in masculine energy, everybody get ready because we're gonna do stuff. You know, it's like, and so, but I can really sense that in myself now.
Yeah.
and before I would hide from it.
It's so interesting. I'm also learning a lot about hormonal cycles and, diving into that. And then understanding like in the beginning of your cycle, you have a lot more energy to do and get those things done. And then, having to respect the lulls of our energy. And there's different times that are better for creating and better for doing and actually integrating that and into from a whole cycle, from the whole month perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of the guests that we've had on in the past also talk about, kind of moon cycles,
Mhm.
times of the year and the seasons, and what it means to be in a full moon at this time versus that time. I don't know a huge amount about it, but I know enough about it to understand that it impacts us. It's a bit like tied in and tied out. You feel differently,
Yes.
you know and so, for example, I learned that a good time to get your hair cut is in a new moon, because the hair follicles.
Oh, I love
I
that.
know, right? And then it's like
Yeah.
the hair follicles stand up at certain times because the pull versus other times when it goes more flat. So, when you have a bad hair day, I'm not saying the moon is responsible for my bad hair day. But I'm
It's
saying it
good.
doesn't hurt, like, right? Like, if this isn't really your thing, and I don't know enough about it to say that it is my thing, but I know enough to know that it certainly doesn't hurt, and if my hair
Mhm.
is completely flat and gone frizzy, it's usually at a similar time to what's going on in the cycle of things. So when you add hormones and you add, moon cycles, and you add our own experiences, and you add, some of our guests talk about past lives and how some things come up in your past life at the same point in this life. So if something happened to you at 33 in your past life, and then it could happen to you, or similar kinds of things can happen.
Yeah.
Look, I don't know how I feel about all
Mhm.
of those things, but by tapping into my feminine energy, I know that it connects me to an awful lot more. It opens me up to all of these different options.
I could not agree more. I absolutely could not. So one of the practice that I've started with is Mama Gina's work of asking your pussy every day, waking up and saying good morning and asking her and talking to her and saying, what do you need today? What do you want? Like what are we going to do today? So, and that connection, and also one thing I'll do is I'll put my hand on my heart and my hand on my pussy and I'll let sound out. And I do, in acting, there's this voice training called Linklater training where you're letting sounds of like bubbles of sound come out. And it's called freeing the natural voice. So it's about kind of creating that resonance from and allowing sound to almost vibrate in different parts of your body. So I've been doing that, kind of integrating this work where I'm allowing that sound to just bubble out like, ha, ha, like on little sounds so that we hear a lot of people's voice and maybe it sounds a little too high pitched or it's very whispery, and instead it's like this allows the full resonance of voice to come out, and even my voice, even as I'm talking about it, is like, oh. So
Amazing.
yeah.
Amazing. Have you ever done Kundalini yoga?
Oh, I have, and that's like,
'Cause that's when you were saying that, I was like, yeah, I felt very, like, inhibited at first, and then once you start letting those sounds out, and I'm not suggesting to listeners that you have to go and do Kundalini yoga, but it's what, those things like the "ha" sounds ridiculous. The "ha," it sounds ridiculous until you start
mm.
really getting into that flow, which is why I asked you about that.
Yes, and I think this is something so important. I am like a huge proponent of using your voice and letting out sound in general, and especially when making love, like in just as much as you can. Or if you're in the gym, actually, like you're actually going to have more strength. And
Oh,
that's
yeah.
studied and proven. But it
You
also,
only have to watch professional tennis, right?
yes, they do it for a reason. Yeah. And we there's also been studies to say that if you just cry and you don't let any sound out, you won't actually let the grief out. It has to leave through sound. Um, and so there's also on a flip side, I worked with this acting coach for years who, anytime that we did too much emotional work in terms of anything with insecurity, vulnerability, things that were like really raw, dark shadow space, would always make sure that we align our our like the vibration of our body again towards pleasure sounds. So, you might imagine that you're at the beach and you're eating ice cream with your best friend, and then you're going to mimic your best friend and you're going to mimic the laughter that you both have. Um, and that will align your body back to, things aren't just the bad side, they're also the good side, so you're practicing both. And you have to let the sound out with it.
You have to let the sound out. Yeah, I didn't cry for my whole adult life until 2019. And I can remember as a child, and I didn't know I remembered it until you just said that. I used to cry like silently, like I'd like, and I couldn't, because, and it would be stuck. The sound would be stuck literally in my chest, and it
Yes.
wouldn't come out. And it's that, you know, we both have this kind of stage life existence where you wouldn't show up on stage unless that was part of your character. You wouldn't show up and not project your message,
Mhm.
raising your voice and taking up space, because imagine how boring it would be for everybody at the back of the auditorium or the theater or the venue if you were quiet and you were small. Nobody would see you or hear you. It'd be tedious.
No, no,
And
and
it's
all
that.
mhm.
It's so important to just
Mhm.
let that out.
The reason, when people say that they have, like, a lump in their throat, the tongue actually goes all the way back into the throat, and it literally is tension in the tongue that is clogging the sound up. So it's so interesting. We have all these metaphors, right? But they're actually anatomically correct. They
That
usually have some sort of connection to something.
that's really interesting, because I'm gonna guess that my inability to cry is something related to my throat chakra.
It If you're guessing it, that's your small whisper right there. Something is coming up.
It's like some people clench their jaw.
Mhm.
I when I work with businesses and we talk about presentation skills, which is entirely different now that we're all online, but certainly presentation skills in a boardroom kind of setting, or like a sales pitch kind of meeting setting. We talk about that kind of alignment, right, of being able to breathe in deeply from your diaphragm and project your voice to project that confidence, and shoulders down and back and all of
Mhm.
those kind of things. But there's somewhere, yeah, and there's the loosening up, but there's somewhere where we hold on to it, and mine is in my jaw, and I
Mm.
clench my jaw.
Well, that's interesting you said earlier about anger, because jaws are known for holding on to anger. You clench your jaw right when you're angry, right? So it's so funny. Even as you say it, I'm like, "Ooh, I need to like massage and loosen up my jaw." Like, "Oh, I'm holding on."
Yeah, yeah, and some
Mhm.
people, it's in their fist. I've had times when it's been in my shoulders. I've had times when I've held it in my lower back. There's always a place where we're holding it, but my go-to is very much in my jaw. And I think doing things like yoga nidra is such a beautiful 10 minutes.
Yes.
You're already laying in bed, just clenching and then unclenching every single part. And if you go through a guided, like if somebody says to you, loosen your jaw, I'm like, my jaw's not clenched. Oh, yes, it
I know.
was.
As soon as you're saying it, I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I feel it."
Yeah.
It's right there. Oh, I literally it's like one of my favorite things. One of the things that gives me pleasure is literally guided meditations where I'm relaxing my body and just going through and releasing tension in bits and pieces and having someone guide me through it, and then I'm asleep. Just
Yeah.
yeah.
It's such a beautiful thing. And it's such a good way of getting in touch with your mind body. So let's talk a little bit about your coaching, because you went from kind of the corporate world into matchmaking, which seems like a million miles apart,
Oh, yeah.
and then into coaching, which doesn't seem like such a huge leap. But talk to us a little bit about what who you help and what your coaching is about.
Absolutely. So I work with women who are usually, in their late 20s to 30s. I interestingly work with very creative people who are going through a bit of grief from the how they expected life to turn out, and then it didn't quite go that way. And it's very, very interesting. I've noticed this. I mean, maybe living in New York City and seeing women in their 30s, pursue something for years, and it just didn't shake out in the fantasy that they expected it. So now we're starting to deal with, okay, well, I have new priorities that have come up. I want a family, I want these new things, but I still really want this other thing. So we do a lot of work that is going into why, like the shame, things that are kind of hidden back, to let that go and actually start aligning to what is it that you really want now, and setting those goals. And then, going into some very classic coaching, but always reconnecting it to pleasure and what feels good, and looking at pleasure as the expansive, right? Versus fear is is contraction. So if I start to see my client actually contract, I have them get up and explore the other side of it. I'm a physical person too. So I actually, so I do a lot of process coaching, which is like, let's bring the emotions out. Let's get ugly. Let's like, what is it that you're not allowed to express right now? Let's express it. And I have to be moving around. So I'm very, like, you see me, I'm like so animated. But uh, I think that is very powerful for clients to actually embody the change and have the brain be experiencing it in this awareness in the present moment. And then, we set goals from there. We move forward from there. And I always say it's like, therapy is dealing with the past and why things are, but coaching is dealing with the here and now and how we can get to the future. So that's always where we're kind of moving towards, while accepting and loving ourselves in the present, and being grateful for the past. You know.
And all of that, which sounds really easy, but is a whole process.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
so if someone is working with you, they work with you one to one typically.
Yes, yes. So for the last year, I've just done one-to-one, but I am working on a group program that will be coming out in the next couple months. So I'm shooting for an April launch on that. So that will be designing your life with pleasure. And then towards the end of the year, I'm actually working on another program, which is because I am working with so many creatives about the creative process with pleasure. So I'm really excited about that too. So those are the two signature programs coming out this year.
That's exciting. That's really exciting, and I hope you'll come into the Facebook community and share when you're ready to launch, and
Yes.
see if it's the right timing for people. And we will put all of your contact details into the show notes as well, to make sure that if this sounds right, even if you're listening to this in May or June and you feel like, oh, I missed it, it doesn't matter, because you can get in touch with Cayla and find out what's going on, and what the timing is for the different programs.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one-to-one is always an option too, at whatever phase anyone is at. And I do try to make sure that I can work with people kind of where they're at, because I was an actress in New York City, and and no, I know where young artists are at, and it's got to be approachable for them too. So we work things out.
For sure. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about being an actress versus being something like a cabaret performer, like burlesque performing, because an actress is someone else's script. directed
Mm.
by somebody else. You're told a lot of what you're doing. Obviously, you bring things to the role, but it's a very different thing than freedom, such as burlesque. I mean, I now don't choreograph anything. I just freestyle.
Oh, awesome.
I know. So I have like a character. Obviously, I have a costume. I have like a, a narrative. Like I have a message, but how that message comes across is organic on the night. I have the music, like this, there's
Yeah.
certain things, yeah, but there's no like, oh, I'm going to cross here now, and then I'm going to do this
Mm.
thing. And then I just do what feels right in the moment.
And that also makes sense because of with Cabaret, your audience is, and it's part of your story and that you're telling at that time. The audience is different every night. And there's no real fourth wall in Cabaret.
Exactly. So how is it different for you in your experience between doing something like burlesque versus doing something like acting on a stage?
So acting for me is about serving the script. You're serving the story of whoever you're telling. Um, and it's always about how deep you can go to make sure that you're sculpting and crafting the narrative. And it's really, you're serving the only way I can say it is that you're serving the script. So it is about finding all of the truth of the human experience within that, and then sculpting like sculpting a human from there within your own body and up and down your own levels of your own it's like, yes, you can bring your experience to it, and it's your truth. It's kind of always about getting out of the way first. Like we always work with eggs first, and that's the emotion underneath, like what is really happening here. But then the character might not be able to emote in that way because they have defenses. So then you layer that on and just craft it from there. And that's how I kind of work as an actress, which um, is, yeah, that's my technique.
That's very cool. That's very cool. So, and the thing is with something like a cabaret performance, unless you're in a group act, in which case you do need to stick to the choreography and you but assuming you own the stage yourself, you're creating that's not kind of acting and reacting with other characters or other actors on the stage, because you're not telling a story jointly, you're telling the story purely through your own body and props and so on. It's very different, I think.
It's so different, and I was always really jealous of musicians as an actor because I was like, they get to just make something, and they get to perform, and they get to hang out with each other in the in the studio and just put something together and craft it, and then they get to go do it. I was just so jealous of them, and my sister's a musician, and I don't have that gift, and so when I found burlesque, I was like, "Oh, this gives me the power back." Now I can do that and I can create, and there's a whole community that's beautiful that surrounds it. Um, and I can express myself in the weird ways that I want to. I always had through college, the head of our acting program would always tell me to come back down to earth. It's like, because I always wanted to play aliens. And I was like, whatever was the weirdest character, like I would be, can I do this scene? It's like a robot. And so
You
burlesque,
can in burlesque.
yes. And I do. So I'm known for doing like, I have a Dilophosaurus from Jurassic Park where and I'm how he spits the venom out at Newman. So I have that, but it comes out of my vagina. So I have really bold and weird burlesque acts. Yeah.
I I love this. I love this. I need to see this act. This is just so the deal is, if you're listening to this and you're like, what's burlesque? Because when I got my little whisper about go and do burlesque, I did not know what it was.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
If you don't know what that is, you're scratching your head right
yeah,
now.
you're going, what are you guys talking about? Okay, so first of all, most people relate burlesque to something more like what Dita Von Teese does, of kind of
Mm.
classic burlesque of, the strip tease. Gypsy Rose Lee is another one, and the kind of the strip tease. Now, depending on the era, I mean, they did get naked, although they say they didn't, but that was because of licensing laws back in the day. Most places now, you would, if you're female, you would need to be no more than stripped down to pasties and a merkin or G-string. So
Mhm.
there's not full nudity. Also, a myth about burlesque is that it's not necessarily stripping. I have seen reverse burlesque where people have put on clothes. I've seen burlesque where they change from one outfit to another outfit, but there's no really taking off.
Mhm.
Um, I've seen an act where they were stuck in an iceberg, so they were just kind of not moving, and then and then, and then the music all kind of mixed into Frozen Let It Go, and then it all kind of broke open. There was nothing taken off other
Ugh.
than the breaking free of this iceberg. It was the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. Um, so, but it wasn't to do with, the striptease, which a lot of
Mhm.
people think, well, that's what burlesque is. There's all kinds of there's comedy in it. There is the classic stuff. There's burlesque. It's anything that you want to tell as a story. Sometimes there's lip syncing. Sometimes there's kind of a mix of music with your own kind of voiceover. So it's kind of your either your internal thoughts, or you can lip sync it or whatever, of going through, I don't know, Dear Diary, and you're holding a notebook, or something like. But so it could be lots of different things. It isn't necessarily the glove peel, although I do love a glove.
Mhm.
So just if you're listening and you're like, what is burlesque? It is just an expression. It has its roots back into vaudeville, and there's actually a lot of different roots into it, but it ultimately, at least for me, it's an expression with our bodies of sharing our message. And so an
Yes.
alien squirting
Yeah.
whatever that poison from your vagina is a message, right? And very often those
Mhm.
kind of things are, anti-patriarchy, or, kind of
Right.
like we're not stuck in set in a role that we have to adhere to, or whatever it is,
I
Um,
really love it as reflecting society, kind of where we're at, and with that, there's total freedom of expression too, and there's satire to it of whether it's the politics or whether it's, there's just total of making fun of where we're at in society, what we're deciding is shameful, what we're deciding is, and it's bizarre. It can be like it's just satire or it could just be because it's entertaining. And right now, people love to watch anime. And so we're reflecting back anime and making it sexy.
Absolutely, absolutely. One of my favorite burlesque acts is a performer called Sneeze, who is local here in Bristol, who has pea pods on their head, like it's a giant pea pod, and then their face is a pea, and then there's another pea on top, and then there's another pea on top, and as they move, the peas move around in the pod, and they make it move, and it's almost kind of puppetry, and and it has very appropriate music that is if your mind wants to go that way, is actually quite blue, but also could be a children's nursery song. I mean, that's true of a lot of nursery rhymes. You think, I'm not sure that was was Humpty Dumpty really supposed to be breaking into a million pieces? I don't know. That seems a bit dark, you know. I actually live near. This is one of the beautiful things about living in England. I actually live near the little town where there is the actual Jack and Jill originated. Like Jack
Oh,
and Jill,
wow.
children that went up the hill and then fell down and broke their crown. And yeah, yeah, I know. Like that's a real
That
hill.
I didn't know that was a real place.
Yeah, I know. I know. So a lot of this stuff is very dark anyway. And so what you're saying about, that burlesque can really reflect that, um, what's going on in life it's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. So what's your favorite style then? What do you like to do other than to be outer space and filth, which I love?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I do bring the telling a story element to it. So I really my strength is being a storyteller over being a great dancer or being a great acrobat or anything else. So my approach is always, what is a character that I want to express, and what is the story and the journey that they're going to go on? And
I
so,
love that.
yeah, so that's kind of what shapes my acts, and because I'm not the greatest dancer and I'm not the but I always want to make sure that the audience is entertained and that they're coming along with me. So, and then I can turn them on at the same time. As long as I can do all that, we're good. I Joe Boobs Weldon is a legend
I
who
know
I
your boobs.
yeah, she's New York City. So she's New York School of Burlesque. I was actually just over there yesterday taking a class, and she's incredible, but she has one act that I saw her do. She just is literally opening a slit in a glove for the whole song and just playing with it. And it is tantalizing. I mean, it is, you're feeling things. You're like she is just like looking at you and you're like, "Oh my God." And that's all she's doing.
That's fabulous. That's absolutely
Mhm.
fabulous. If you're listening or you're watching this on YouTube, so I should actually say this. If you're listening to this on podcast, it's also available on Vodcast on Confidence to Cabaret YouTube channel. Check out the Vodcast playlist, and you'll see Cayla and I here. If you're here with us on YouTube, you can also listen to this on audio anywhere you get your podcast. I should have said that at the beginning, but I was too excited to talk to Cayla. If you are new to this and you want to find out a little bit more about like what we're talking about, my steer would be to go to the BHOF, which is Burlesque Hall of Fame.
Mhm.
Just put that into YouTube, and you'll get all kinds of stuff in here. One of my close friends, and is ranked, I think, 5th in the world right now, is called Cleopatra. She's based here in London, but she is moving to the US, which is very heart wrenching.
Oh.
Just a beautiful, beautiful soul. And she does more of the Jessica Rabbit and more of the kind of Dita Von Teese
Oh
sort of
my
stuff,
gosh.
right? I
Yes.
adore watching that, but I could never do it. It's just not my style, And this is the point: is that cabaret and burlesque is for everybody. Like, this isn't about age. This isn't about size. This isn't about gender. This is for everybody. That's the whole kind of point. It's the most inclusive place, so long as you're sharing a message that isn't undermining or harming others.
100%. And that's what I love about it, because it allows every person wherever they're at to be sexy, to be beautiful, to be expressed. And I mean, like, that's my mission in life. So, like, that, it just feels so, exciting to be a part of that community and to be there cheering on, other men, women, or whatever gender, just being fully accepting and embracing, and to be held in that space. It's like, how often do you get to be held in whoever you truly are by a warm audience who's there to support you being whatever you are?
Absolutely. And I think it's in doing that we really start to get in touch with it, because both you and I, there's no mistaking this, that both you and I include movement of some sort in our programs. I literally include movement, because I think it's important to get into our body without being in our head. And so for me, for example, a movement class, which would always be part of a program, is about letting your body do what it wants to do.
Mhm.
I I have no rhythm, and I don't remember choreography very well. So I can do it, but it's very hard for me to remember choreography. And so if I'm doing something with anybody else, I work extra hard, because otherwise I end up just freestyling again. And then everybody else, which has happened to me before, where everybody else has kind of gone, "Oh, we're following her now.
Oh.
Apparently, we're not doing all that other stuff anymore." But what I'm saying is that, a lot of times people will say, "I can't sing," or "I can't dance," or "I can't." it's not about that. It's about freedom to move your body. And if you are listening to this and you're like, oh, that sounds good, go put on some music, switch off your brain, and just
Mhm.
let your body lead you and see what happens. Sometimes I end up on the floor. Most of the time I end up on the sofa with my leg in the air. I don't know why. I'm very flexible. So I like to have my leg in the air for some reason. I don't know. It might be that you're dancing around the room like your dad at a party. Who knows?
Yes. Oh my god. And that's a mood. That is a whole mood, and if you're in that mood, you better get it out.
Absolutely, absolutely. And when we talked at the beginning about, peeling back the layers and stuff, this is hard work, right? Your inner knowing, finding that, aligning with that, making sure that you're taking actions with that.
Mhm,
It's exhausting. And particularly since a lot of the time we're on our own or we're in groups of people where everybody else is talking about it. So you're supposed to be doing it. But if you don't, it's tiring and draining. And being able to be in your body and feel
mm.
good is energizing and important.
I absolutely love what you're saying for so many different reasons, because I think that we can be very, reverent, maybe is the word, of just being really honoring of, oh, I got to do the work and I'm going deep into my soul, and and that is such a trap for toxic positivity, and for literally being exhausted. And it's like, well, the real thing that we want to get to is loving our life, right? Like, or feeling like we're on a path that we feel good about. Um, and so it's like, play, just giving yourself permission to play, which kind of ties us back to pleasure, where we started from, this whole loop around, where we renounce pleasure. We renounce the things. We even think that this work that we're doing to get where we want to go needs to be so like deep and meaningful, and really, like, sometimes it can actually be silly, and there can be bursts of giggles that come out because you're uncomfortable with where you've just gone, and that's fun, and that's actually expansive and opens the body up and opens the mind and spirit up. um and that way it also makes it more sustainable over a period of time, because if you just get stuck in this like self-help bubble where you're listening to podcasts all the time, and I got to do this, I've been there, so I'm talking from experience, and it's like, no, I got to work through this block is in my way, and if I don't get through this block, and meanwhile you're blocking yourself because it's a trap. It's like you're spinning in this vortex of I need to be better, I need to be better, I need to be better. But it's actually, if you just stop, play, let go, then you're going to expand. You're going to connect with something higher. You're going to hear the whisper, the intuition will bubble up. So it all kind of comes back together.
It certainly does. It certainly does. And I love what you're saying there. I think I went through a time, and actually a very wonderful coach who is a friend of Confidence through Cabaret did a three-part series with us around various tackling fears. She said, I said, if I had coaching, what would you give me coaching on? And she said, why you need to be at everybody's party. And by that, she meant, why do I have to go on every single free webinar? And I said, oh, because I love them.
Mm,
I love everybody's stuff. I want to learn about Instagram Reels and branding and sales and tech, and I love it all.
yes. Oh my
But
god, feeling that
you
message right now.
ended up not being able to do any of it because I didn't have time to apply it because I had to jump on the next webinar. And
Yes.
it's that. It's that. It's just find the thing you need to do now, and that's where a coach can really help you, right? Is to just kind of prioritize what you need to be doing right now. And I just come back from 16 days of not being on anybody's webinar, and I feel
Mhm.
better for it. And I feel actually, because I can hear that voice now, I feel like I know what I need to do now. And if I
Yes.
just kept hearing everybody else's voice, which I like to do because it lets me hide, then I don't have to do anything because I'm too busy learning. And
Mhm. That is one of my, the genius is it's the imposter of being the genius. That is one of my kryptonites. So I'm constantly learning how to kind of navigate that one and to be able to step in and like, oh, I did it again, where it's like, oh, I need to learn a little bit more. I need to learn this. But it's it's a defensive practice in itself. It's like that right there is keeping you safe because chances are you do know more than, someone else that you can help rise them to that level, right? Or you've learned one strategy, if you're doing business and hopping into a million webinars, it's like, well, have you really applied it and have you really milked it for everything? And I've been big right now on actually curating the content that I have coming in to try to actually also peel it back. So I'm getting it from just a couple places instead of just because I will do that too.
yeah, I think for me, it's not so much of the genius, but I because I do a huge amount of imposter syndrome work, and for me, although I have the symptoms of the genius, which means I have to be, I don't know enough, I need another certificate, and I have experienced that in the past. Um, when you look at intention behind things, so my activity is the same as yours, but for a different reason. So for a lot of us, we need to have another coaching certificate or another program or another, we have to keep buying things because we need the certificate. And I can remember going to a program one time about life coaching. This is way back when life coaching was just starting in the UK. And I was there with some women and they said, but you're a coach and you've been a coach for a long time. Why do you need the certification? And they made me a sticker at lunch that said, whatever the coaching company was, certification, and they stuck it on me and they went, there, you've got that now. You don't need to come here. Like you can go, and it was that. So I have had that need for, I need
Mhm.
the certificate or the badge. For me, it's actually it's the same activity, but when you unpeel the layers, back to the beginning of this conversation, I start realizing that it isn't that at all. There's some sort of block of showing up because I don't have to
Mm.
show up if I keep going on everybody else's. Then I didn't have time, legitimately. I didn't have time to do all those things. And so then I have to go back into, okay, so what was going on there? And this is the kind of work that I know you do as well, of kind of getting behind that, of what's going on, rather than if you try and do these pieces without a coach, sometimes we don't get deep enough into it to understand it, and we say, oh well, I won't do webinars anymore. Well, you need to understand why you're not doing them, what was the intention behind that, and what it is that you will put you on the right course. um and I
Yes.
love this conversation. We need to have a whole imposter syndrome conversation at some point because I don't feel done with you, Cayla.
I know, I can't believe the time just flew by.
I know. Okay, so your favorite burlesque prop would be what?
It's, a giant balloon. I do several acts with a huge giant balloon, and you can do so much with it. I have a superwoman where, I'm saving the world and the balloon is actually the world, but and if you've never seen this before, I'm going to have to send you a photo because this is actually um, it's a very unusual prop, and it's not performed with a and reasonably so because it is hard to control on stage.
Is this one where you climb into it?
No, it's not one that you climb into it. It's taking actually from a very classic, 20s, 30s, they would do it, and it was just very light and flowy, and this huge balloon, and you're just elegant with this balloon, and then I take that on its head and, make it raunchy. And, but there's so much that you can do with it, like, you can do the, like, if you undo the balloon and you have to it's very that's one of those things that undoing a balloon on stage is also very tricky, so it has to be kind of really practiced, but then you can do like the 80s blowing the hair out, and it's just like there's so much comic, you know, comedic work that you can do with the balloon as well. And it can take on whatever energy you imbue with it too. So anyways, that's I could go on about balloons for a long time.
I absolutely love that. I have to be honest, I haven't played with a balloon. I used to do rhythmic gymnastics, which is now called artistic gymnastics. So that's with the ribbons and the balls and the
Oh.
clubs and the hula hoops. I used to compete quite seriously with that when I lived in Canada, but um when I was younger, and I've never played with a balloon before. And I don't know why, because I'm sitting there going, "Oh, I can think of, like, all the things you can do with a ball, because you can roll
Mhm.
it," but I haven't ever played with a balloon. And you know what I'm going to do? That's what I'm going to do for my movement piece tomorrow, is just play with balloons.
Oh, it's so fun. So, you know, it's God, I could keep going on about this, but this is only just coming to me about probably why I love it so much. So, my mom was actually a recreational therapist, and she taught coping skills to drug and alcohol addicts to teach them how to kind of get off drugs by using games and using recreation. So she would always have balloons around because she would do so much work with teaching coping skills with balloons. And I'm only just connecting this right now about why I probably am resonating with balloons so much. Like I had this as teaching me coping skills since I was a kid with the fragility of them. But if you know, if you play with them, they're fun and they're light and they suspend and are elegant at the same time. I mean, how fun.
Yeah, I'm going down a whole mental thing. I'm thinking punching balloons. Do you remember those? I'm
Yes.
I've got a
Yeah,
whole I need to go and explore this. I don't know what it's turning into, Kayla, but I will
I
keep you
know.
posted. But there's stuff going on in my head right now that's just exploding, and I don't know what it is. And this is the beauty of being able to express yourself through cabaret performing, is just, even if you just do it in your own living room, just playing with toys. I have two fans, like just the paper fans sitting across the room from me. I have like silky rose petals. I
Ooh,
just got a bag of pink ones. I have red ones, and sometimes I just throw them, and then I just let them float and fly all over me. So you can just do. I've got ropes. I've got all kinds of stuff in this room. It's
oh my
ridiculous.
god, I love ropes. I mean, and then you get into all shibari or
I
never
mean, oh, Kayla, I can't believe you just said shibari. And whenever I say shibari, people go, "What is that?" If you're listening to this and you don't know what shibari is, go and have a look at it.
but
Um,
not on your work computer.
and I mean, there's not. It doesn't have to be that. Oh, that. Okay, we need to do a whole nother podcast on that. Um, yeah, because it doesn't have to be done with another person either.
Mhm. Yeah.
I use it as a meditation technique.
Oh, wow. Alright, sign me up for that masterclass.
Yeah, yeah,
That's so beautiful.
yeah. It is so
I'm
beautiful.
imagining now, I'm like, now the same thing, I'm like wheel turning. Ooh.
Yeah, so I have jute, and then I have cotton, and then I have like a synthetic, different ropes, and they all have different textures to them, and that makes a difference to how that feels, and where you need, going back to our jaw clenching, or wherever you're carrying your tension. It's a kind of an extension of my yoga nidra practice when I need to.
Oh my god.
I know.
I
Okay. All right. All right. So we're going to do imposter syndrome and shibari. I'm writing this down. We'll do a part 2 at some point soon.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
Okay. Stage name? Do you have a stage name?
My stage name is Cayla V, which is actually I went back and forth. I had another stage name I performed with, which was Meritrix for a long time,
Okay.
and I wanted my identity, my name being Cayla, to actually be closer to my stage name. So I changed it to Cayla V, and it feels more resonant.
Beautiful. It's important that, and if you're a listener to this podcast, or any of the lives, even in the community, we tend to talk about our stage names. I'm a huge advocate about using that energy and that power that is a separate identity, but still a huge part of us. Because we talked briefly about imposter syndrome. We'll need to come back to that conversation another time, but
Mhm.
that imposter voice is a voice that we often don't question, that tells us you're not good enough, or you need more certificates, or do more webinars, or whatever. And this is a different voice, and it's another way of combating. I use this a huge amount in my work. And I am also
Mhm.
Helen, which is a new name for me, a fairly new. I only previewed it at the end of last year, and that is about that I'm this, and I'm also this, and I'm also this, and I can be anything I want to. I can be all of the things, and also this, and also that, and also, and so my
Mhm.
intro is very confusing to compares, because they're like, also Helen, also Helen, also Helen. And it's like a whole mood,
So
dep
fun.
depending on
Yeah.
how you say that. And people
Yes.
who get it are like, you can be a mom, and you can be a wife, and you can be a this, and you can be a that, and you can be, and also, and also, and also, and also. And we're not the labels that we are given, or that we define ourselves or describe ourselves with. We're
I
so much more than those labels.
I love that so much.
Thank
Oh,
you. Well, I love Cayla Via. I think it's very cool, and it's very linked to your name. So thank you for sharing that.
of course, of course.
And my last question, well, actually, I have two more questions. One of them is, what is your favorite lesson that you've ever learned?
Mm. Oh, wow. Okay. Um, favorite lesson. I'm going it's funny because it's one that I is that you need to concentrate on doing one thing. I love that. I'm a big proponent of I'm an anti-multitasker and I'm a one tasker. But I also love to challenge it at the same time because I'm also rebellious. So I challenge it and also say, but you're also allowed to be multi everything. So it's this duality in it that is the thing that I always go back to.
Beautiful. Beautiful. All right. And the last question that I have for you is, where can people find you and get in touch with you?
So tofeelsparks.com on Instagram to at tofeelsparks. On Facebook, it's actually Cayla Buettner, so Buettner. And yeah, and then if you sign up for my mailing list too, you'll get a whole bunch of freebies, including some free audio meditation. And if you're single, there's a workbook for, finding what it is to look for when you're looking for love. So there's a whole bunch of freebies that kind of come together when you join the mailing list, even if you don't even know you're going to get them. So yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. You can always find Cayla via Heather Jean or Confidence to Cabaret. If you can't find Cayla for some reason, and I don't know why that would be, it'll be in the show notes. But if for some reason you can't find her, then let me know, and I will put you in touch. I'm a huge believer that collaboration is the way forward, and community is just such a beautiful act of love. So thank you so much for sharing with us, Cayla.
Oh, thank you so much. It was so beautiful. And your energy and getting to know you is just, oh, you are radiant. And I'm sure that everyone in your community is able to also feel that and get lifted up by it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I've just come off a transatlantic flight, so I feel you've made my day, because I was like, oh, I feel like hell in terms of like there's no energy. So I'm really glad that that's coming through, because I am truly thrilled to have this conversation with you, Cayla.
Oh, thank you. Oh man, yeah, I know. You would not know right now that you're you're on your probably final hour before time to chill out and relax on this night.
Yeah, well, I wasn't flying the plane, so I chilled on the plane quite a bit, but Okay. Thank you again, Cayla. I am Heather Jean. This is Confidence Through Cabaret, the podcast or the vodcast, depending whether you're on your podcast or your YouTube links. I am here to remind you that it is your body and it is your world and it's your stage. Take up space. Own it right now. Thank you.
Thank you.